Welcome to the Commercial Edge podcast with me, Chris Webber. Come and enjoy a virtual coffee while I share my experience and ideas that could help you overcome difficult people at work. I share my thinking and insights so that you can find new ways to overcome challenges and gain a commercial edge and unleash the power of people. Welcome to our latest episode of the podcast with me, Chris Webber. I'm really pleased today that I've got a guest, Helen Lynch, to join me to have a conversation. And I guess this series is in celebration of the launch of my new book, Get the Elephant Out of the Room, which is about outsmarting difficult people at work. I'm going to talk to different people about their experiences of different people at work. And it's funny how when I talked to my daughter about having produced the book, having written the book, she said, "Dad, what's it about? And I told her, and she said, "God, that is definitely something we can all relate to." And so I'd love to get to know Helen a little bit and share some of her experiences with her. I think she's doing some amazing stuff at the moment, and I'll get her to tell you about what she's doing. And then we're going to start to talk about the difficult people that she's met in her career and how she succeeded despite those difficult people, but more to the point, the lessons that she's learned and the lessons that she's sharing with people that she's working with now and clients in the future to help them to avoid the same traps and the same challenges that we've all fallen into. So Helen, it's wonderful to have you. Thank you for finding some time to join me.
Oh, hi, Chris. No, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Tell us a bit about your journey. So tell us what you're doing now, but then go back and tell us how you've ended up here. Let's get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I need to say congratulations on your book, and just to say I'm a massive fan of yours. And we met a long time ago, didn't we? At the Gap Partnership. So yeah, I've been following you and your journey too. So yeah, it's a privilege to be here, and yeah. So
thank you. Oh, thanks, very kind, Helen. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so my journey has been a long time in retail, so 23 plus years in marketing roles, and then into commercial, and then into more latterly the last 8 years brand licensing. But I'm currently, since the end of February this year, I've gone it on my own, and I'm a retail consultant and a development coach. So essentially, I help brand professionals and businesses get in front of buyers and win and grow those retail partnerships. So that's it in a nutshell, really.
So you talked about licensing there as a throwaway, but I know that is very much central to work you want to do and you're very passionate about. For people who are not familiar with licensing and maybe don't understand what it might bring to their business, whether they're a retailer or whether they are a supplier with a brand, tell us a bit of the headlines of what it's about.
Yeah, of course. So there are different models of brand licensing, but the classic model is where a manufacturer wants to produce a product and has the rights to produce that product and distribute that product under license from an IP owner, an intellectual property owner. So, just to give a very easy example, it might be a third-party supplier who is producing Disney products and then distributing them to retail. Okay. So that is your classic brand licensing model.
But it's not just for people like Disney, right? So if someone came to me and said, "Hey, Chris, I want to produce Foxley elephants to the elephants out of the room. I want to produce squishy elephants that are, with the Foxley brand." I could license them, right? So that I could do it. It doesn't mean that I have to be Disney to license something.
No, not at all. If you've got a brand you can license, the rights out to other people to manufacture products under your IP. Yes, absolutely.
And so one of the things we talked about when we met a couple of weeks ago was you were talking about some exciting crossovers that creates opportunities for. And I want you to share a little bit about that.
So in terms of crossovers,
So suddenly brands are creating these opportunities to work together and partner in ways that starts to synergize opportunities. That's the thing that really caught my attention.
Yeah, no, on mine recently, I've got a passion for well-being as well. And I think I've been looking at this in the wellness space. And recently there's been some great examples. So where brands can collaborate within the licensing space. So you've got, for example, Perfect Ted, who is the number one currently on the Phoebe 100, for entrepreneurial companies growing and in that space. And Perfect Ted have done a licensing, or did do last year, a licensing deal, collaboration with Joe and the Juice cafes. And that was really interesting to me because Joe and the Juice then had a Perfect Ted matcha drink, as well as the consumer basically were immersed in the Joe and the Juice atmosphere, and it became an experience. And I think that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing much more, and licensing getting involved in experiences and improving the consumption of products and how we consume those products. And it's more of a lifestyle choice then. It becomes much more of a lifestyle choice rather than just a transaction.
Mm-hmm. So just touching then into moving towards difficulties and challenges, what are some of the problems and challenges that come up in this space when you start thinking about the relationship between retailers, brands, licensees, all of those things? What sort of challenges come up?
Yeah, so the challenges are, I think, one of the main ways I help businesses is how to actually get in front of a buyer. And then, of course, in terms of what we're talking about today, how to actually get across and deal with a buyer who may be seen as a difficult person, because in that situation, it's not necessarily a classic, personality clash. It's a business meeting whereby you have objectives to meet, and they also do. And buyers, I could say, are notorious for being maybe difficult, or not making this process easy. So I do help businesses and professionals in that. And I think that my main thing is you have to get the buyer to understand that you get them. So this is me putting it very, very simply. So the objective is, obviously, you want the buyer to list your product, but you need to get across that you get them, and that the reason why you're actually sitting there is that there's a fit between your product and their and the retail environment and their retail customer. So it's ultimately about having, a system and a strategy before you sit down with that buyer as to how you're going to approach that and how you're going to get that across to them.
Music to my ears, because I think that is so much the challenge that people have. And you came from the retail side. So were you a difficult buyer? Were you that person, or does that help you empathize with the challenges that the retailer has, or does it help you empathize with the brand owner?
My approach has always been more of a understand the other party, open communication. I've worked in 6 retailers, so I've worked under many bosses, and my approach is you don't have to be a certain way, the old school way, some people might say. You don't have to be, dictatorial. You don't have to be nasty, to put it plainly. My style is much more open communication and understanding what both parties need, and much more of a collaborative approach. In my career, I have managed buying teams a lot, and in terms of actually buying, I've probably only bought myself about probably for 1 year, and so I think that's actually caused issues, and that's in terms of dealing with difficult people, in terms of sometimes with direct reports over my career. where I may have had an internal promotion and, my boss might have seen something in me in terms of managing people. That's where I've also found where I've had to learn quickly how to deal with people.
That's really interesting, Helen. I think and it's definitely something that I'm sure lots of people can connect with. There's a discussion often about the differences between being able to do a task and being able to lead a team to do the task are stark.
Mm-hmm.
And I know all the people I know who work in leadership development really talk about, just because you're very capable at doing the task like sales or buying doesn't mean that you can then lead a team to do the same thing. And what they encourage is organizations try and spot the leader talent and separate that out from the kind of the buyer talent or the sales talent and bring that in through there. And there's this, I can't remember the exact phrase, but there's the concept of people get promoted to their biggest level of incompetence, that I'm not qualified for this job, and then I get the job, and then if I learn how to do it, and then I get promoted again. But I think what you're saying here is the opposite, is then all of a sudden people believe that you're not capable because you've only got 1 year's experience. How did that feel? What give us a scenario of what happened and what sort of things you had to deal with as you were managing those individuals, those people?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think I've had a lot of imposter syndrome over the years. It's been a struggle, and I have found myself being promoted a number of times in different companies and having a similar scenario. But obviously, as you say, being identified for someone who can manage and lead teams, and then there's a conflict sometimes where those people may not, they might have thought, oh well, I haven't got the credentials. If you haven't been buying for the last 10, 15, 20 years like I have, they might be thinking, how can you lead me? So that was difficult, not easy. So what I would do then is take advice where I need to from my line managers, read books. I've read lots of books on how to deal with difficult people in the past, but also, really understanding people. My expertise, I would say, and what I've learned over the years through my experience is we are all human, and it's about, what is the human potential of the person that I'm working with, and what are their motivations for being how they are? How can I understand that, and how can I try and adapt my own responses? Now that hasn't been easy, and it certainly wasn't easy right in my younger days. But it becomes easier over the years when you go through these experiences, and each one of them kind of builds your, the whole book it builds in your journey towards where you are now. And, understanding that people are people, and they have, one of my first things in my system is never assume anything, and basically, the only thing you can assume is that there may be so much more to that person. There will be so much more to that person underneath what they're showing. So that's the first assumption you should always make with someone, and trying to understand them to a degree, or at least get to know as much as you can about them. Some bosses it's very difficult to actually get close to in a certain sense. And so, just try and get to know as much as you can about them and what motivates them. And then it helps how to deal with them. And then the same with the direct reports, really understanding their insecurities, understanding what makes them tick, why they might be behaving or speaking in a certain way, and making sure you do have boundaries. So I've learned all of those things. And, you have essentially got a role to do at the end of the day. But I think it's about having an open communication as well. I think that's really key.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think it's, just that comment about recognizing that there's more going on below the surface than what we see. I mean, we all have these snapshots in people's lives, and even more so when we're online and we get like an hour's worth of time on looking literally through a letterbox at their profile on an image online, or how they show up at an office in a meeting, is not everything else that's happening. We don't understand the pressure that they're under at home, their financial pressure, their sick children, their pressure from parents and family and expectations and things. And so we are very much trying to look through I like to think the idea of looking through a letterbox and judge what the world looks like. You can literally only see that strip in front of you, and we're also very good at decorating that strip in front of us the way that we want people to make it see. You know, it's we will show people what we want them to see. And over the years, I've learned so much about the importance of status in relationships. And there's a wonderful book that I read, which I found really insightful, which focused on how important status is to us, and how they talked about it's called the status game. And we're constantly playing status games with all the groups that we're involved in. So whether that's at home, whether that's at work, whether that's with friends, with, you join a club, anything, we are in this status game where we are trying to build or maintain our status with the group that we have. And how we respond emotionally is very connected to that status. And there's so many things that you just talked about which I think are affected by that. So, for example, you were talking about you being promoted, having had a year or so's experience as a buyer, to become a leader of a team. Well, you can imagine if you've done 5-10 years worth of buying experience, you believe that you're very capable, you think you've been doing an amazing job, ticking all the boxes. And then here's this, young upstart who is then promoted to become your boss. That's a very emotionally challenging place to be in terms of just your status in the organization. There's so many layers. Like, what does that reflect on you? Are you being pushed down? Are they better than me now? Or am I losing my credibility in the organization? And you can see that it's going to drive an emotional reaction. Just when you just look at that one particular element, you can start to get a sense of what you talked about is how people respond and react. And we're very quick to dismiss that because it's easy to become the leader and then assume status. And this is the other thing which is important to understand, is that, you being promoted, and it'd be interesting to hear your reflection on this. Did you suddenly feel like, now I have status, and that changed some of your behavior? And then what happened to that dynamic? Were you promoted from within the team as a colleague to a manager?
I was promoted. I was promoted internally from one team to another, in actual fact. But I think a lot of what you said is really interesting, and I feel that status is a really key thing. I think that ego is another. And when I say ego, not just sort of the negative connotation about ego, but our ego, if we feel that our ego is sort of threatened by change, then it can, as you say, influence a certain emotional response. I think change is something that people struggle with, and it's when we're comfortable for quite some time, and then something happens, and there's a change, maybe a structural change in what we're talking about, and then it's how do I as a person deal with that? So where am I on my emotional intelligence journey? It might sound cliche, but it's true in the sense that, do I let my insecurities run my ego and my emotional responses, or have I learned through my experiences and, essentially sometimes it takes, for me personally, it's taken, years and with lots of experiences to get to where I am now, to be able to say that I am aware that I have grown over the years and through these experiences, but not everyone is in that place now to be able to say that they're aware of that. And so, status definitely plays a part of it. How you want to be, what motivates you to get up in the morning, how do you want to be rewarded is another part of it. And in terms of understanding that in different people and how you therefore behave around them and what you say to them and how you, and I think respect is another word that crops up a lot. At the end of the day, that, there are people who are more respectful to others than other people. And, so I think there's a lot here about understanding the person, really trying to understand the person, what motivates them, where are they in their journey, and really trying to adapt that. Adaptability is something I would talk about a lot, and it's adapting your own behaviors to that other person, but not to the extent. And, we are all in business at the end of the day, and it's certainly not playing to people and, risking your own sense of what's right and wrong or anything like that. Because you have to set boundaries as well and be firm and get the job done. But it is about being human as well.
And I'm curious about the word, you chose this emotional intelligence journey. When you look back through your career, do you see that? And clearly you notice you're very emotionally connected to people and personalities. And so you look back and you notice that there was a problem and you noticed that there was things that weren't quite right. And that's why, there was some difficulty going on with different people. Do you look back at it now thinking, now that I know the things that I know and my experience, would you do things differently when you go back to look at it there? Did you feel like you struggled for too long, either not knowing what the answer was or not being comfortable with what the answer was?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, actually. I mean, if I had known then what I know now, I would probably follow the same process, but I'd be more confident in myself. I wouldn't have so much imposter syndrome. I wouldn't doubt myself. And, but in terms of the process, in terms of, acknowledging that, these people have got their own, lives and they are human, and trying to understand people's motivations, that was there then, and I would probably get to somewhere a bit quicker than I did then. But and then when it comes to choices, so at the end of the day, you've gone through the whole process of understanding and adapting behaviors towards other people, and controlling. You want to be able to control your own thoughts and your own actions in a situation with other people. I can now come to this process, with all of that knowledge and insight, which I didn't have then. So it's a more confident and probably quicker process. But then, coming to the actual choice of, well, ultimately with difficult people, after all of this and trying, you have a choice, and you can decide, I can stay and battle through this and learn and grow and really understand how I can be a better manager or how I can be a better direct report. You can decide to stay and do that, or you can decide, well, I'm balancing the risk against the risk of maybe my mental or physical or both health against the happiness and growth potential of this business or role or relationship. So, and then you can decide to leave or move on, or, ask to be transferred to a different department. So, yeah.
Do you think that's, because I think that's a very interesting question, because because we have these situations. We have bosses we don't like. We have, scenarios where we feel like we're being victimized, and life is becoming very miserable. And there's one voice in our heads which says, no, 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 keep going. This is a learning journey. We are diamonds are formed through pressure, and all these cliches that people throw around. There's another voice which says, life's too short. What are you doing? Why are you making yourself miserable? Why are you putting up with this behavior, this treatment? With hindsight, do you look back at some of those and think you'd have made a quicker journey decision to exit? Was it like not worth putting up with? Do you feel like you timed it well when you made those decisions? Because clearly, I'm assuming you did make those kind of exit choices at some point, or the decision to stick with it. What's your reflection on those?
Yeah, I think a great question. Again, I'm not someone who regrets anything. I don't actually believe in regret. I think that we make choices as we go along our lives, and it's all part of the journey. And, you do make choices, and you make informed decisions and you take the action when you're ready, when you really are ready. But, I think that, I feel like in my work experience, yes, I was ready at the time that I made the choice to either stay or to go. I mean, for example, to give you a really good example, once, this is many years ago, before my retail career, and I was I was a waitress, and my boss threw a glass. This is a long time ago, because it was a glass ashtray.
Oh, cripes.
Across the room at someone else, and nearly hit me. And I made the decision to leave immediately. So that is, again, balancing the level of risk against growth potential in that role. And of course, it was an easy decision to make. But I think where your values actually clash is probably, where I look back and I think, no, I made the right decision. I've got no regrets, because my values clashed, particularly there, and risk. But, later on within UK retailers, and some of the decisions that I've made has been really in terms of, not having the same set of values. Where someone might have a value of deliver at all costs, that is not my value. My value would be more about deliver where it's achievable within a set parameter. So, I feel like I've made the right decisions along the way, and some of them, yes, they have taken longer, but if they've taken longer to make, it's for the right reasons. I've been learning along the way.
Yeah. And you've used a couple of times the idea of imposter syndrome, and I find this is very interesting, because I think it's morphed over time. This idea of imposter syndrome, and I can't remember who coined it. It was maybe Michelle Obama or some other people who kind of really popularized the idea of imposter syndrome, and it comes up a lot. People talk about it a lot, particularly when they achieve success early, like you did. You get promoted into a leadership role, into a management role, and then you have these doubts, right? Do I know what I'm doing? Have I got the capability to do it? And I've just finished a really, really interesting book by a guy who, it was his career, it's his autobiography as a tennis player. And it's brilliant, because he was a very, very good tennis player, but he was nowhere near the top 50. His peak was 130 in the world, ranked 130 in the world. And he spent much of his career ranked 300 to 200, that kind of time, which sounds like amazing. And he was on the tour. He was on the world tour. And he was at times playing with incredible, talented people. He met Venus and Serena Williams when they were children. He was like 14 and they were, 12 or whatever, out in Florida. And one of the interesting things that he talked about through his autobiography is the number of times that he went into matches doubting his ability. So feeling like this other player that I'm about to come up against is a better player than I am, or has got more experience than I have. And, am I good enough? And at the start of his career, he did quite a few things which were effectively delaying his progress. He went to college to play college tennis, and with hindsight, he's saying, well, it was a good choice, and I learned a lot and I developed a lot. But he also contrasted it with other players that were in his age group who didn't do that, who went straight into playing professional tour tennis. And I think there's a big piece of this, which is confidence, but also a big piece of it, which is courage, that is to go ahead and do and follow your instincts. And when I look back at my career, one of the things I notice in my career is that my first management job, going back to a similar parallel for you, I was promoted to manage a team that I had been in. And my first experience was then very directed by my boss at the time, who I felt like I needed to want to please, but also to follow their instructions, because this was my first manager's job. I was very young. I was managing people who had been my colleagues, who were more experienced than I was in terms of exactly your scenario, people who'd done the job for years. And I felt like I needed to follow his instructions. And then I went against my gut. So situations that I felt I should have handled in one way, he was saying, no, handle it this way. This is what you need to do. And I think I fell into a trap. I'm going to call it a trap because it wasn't my style. And later in my career, I remember getting some coaching with a guy, and we went into a room, and it was one of those kind of watch him do it and then follow it. And we went into a meeting, and he ran a coaching session, and then came out, and we went to the next time was my chance to do it. And I went in and I did exactly what he did. And we came out and he said, no, that doesn't work for you at all. You need to think about doing it differently. And to me, it was like a repeat of what had happened in the early part of my career, where I'd gone against my instinct. I did the same thing, but because he was so direct and said, no, do it differently, the lesson immediately clicked for me. Of like, go with your instinct, Chris. And I think this is so important, that this combination of knowing what your strengths are, knowing what you're good at, having the courage to stick to those things, because those are the things that maybe someone else has noticed have been the reason why you got promoted in the first place. Yeah. And then just having the confidence to do it, I think is probably my tip for dealing with imposter syndrome. And I don't know what your reflections are when you think back at those times.
No, completely agree with you. And yeah, just to add then, so my take on this is it all starts with the self. So we talked about what other people are going through when you're dealing with difficult people, and what you're going through as having imposter syndrome, maybe in that situation. It's all about your self-belief, and that comes from knowing your worth. So I am enough, I can do this. I am competent. I am, I have been identified as being confident, So it starts with the feeling of worth, and that gives you self-belief. And courage comes from that self-belief. And courage then enables action. So it's action that actually builds confidence. So then it becomes secular, because is that the word? Secular, circular, because then achieved actions reinforce your self-belief. So, achieving your task or goal or success then reinforces your self-belief that I am in the right position, I can do this. And it becomes this whole circular pattern. But it does start with that feeling of worth. And sometimes you do have to do some work on that. And I'm a practicing development coach, and I have brought that into my consultancy and the service that I offer in terms of skills development training. And I think what you were saying is about, going with your gut is so important. It's actually the skill set of authenticity. It is really believing in your own worth, understanding who you are, and bringing personality to the table, and really, being authentic to the true you, and not following other people's advice to an extent, making sure that you are being true to yourself in what you do. And that will help you in any human interaction. And of course, one of the most difficult interactions is when it's with a seemingly difficult person. So that, that feeling of self-worth is worth working on. And that's, it's interesting. You've had coaching in the past. I've had coaching in the past, and I'm now a coach. And it's not something, it's basically whereby someone is investing in learning more about themselves to be able to interact in an improved way, adapt to situations and to people put in front of you, so that you could, optimize the way that you react and respond in an appropriate manner, and get and achieve the objective of the meeting or of the, daily encounter with somebody that's a difficult person in your life.
Yeah, and I think, to me, just there is something about whether you're trying to impress somebody and who you're trying to impress. And I think that, to me, is whether you come back to, am I being true to my values? And are you betraying your values because you're trying to impress someone else who's being difficult? So, and I want to connect it to what you're doing now around helping people build retailer partnerships, and going into that kind of going, hi, I'm going to try and impress this person. I know that they're tough. I know that they're assertive. I know that they're going to try and take control of it. So I want to try and impress them. And then you're starting to cut against the things that you might be good at, the insights that you have, the values that you bring it, because you're too worried about what they think and of you and how they judge you. And immediately you've now, in my opinion, you've focused on the wrong thing. You're not focusing on the value that you're bringing. You're focusing on impressing them. And it's a subtle shift, but I think it's a really important one that, I see people kind of going, oh, all they care about is price. And therefore we just need to talk about price. I'm like, well, if price isn't your strength, then it's never going to impress them. They're not going to be moved by what you have, because it's just not good enough. So instead, you do need to stick to the things that are impressive. What's your experience of advice that you're now passing on to the next, to the people that you're working with to try and get them to unlock doors that seem locked?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an interesting point about trying to impress people and losing sight of what you're of who you are and what you stand for. And I'm helping people build solid relationships based on trust, relationships that are valued, and relationships that will be lasting and not just, a flash in the pan. So in terms of doing that, it is about what we've been talking about here. It's about knowing your sense of worth, what you stand for, what your brand stands for, what your product range stands for. And it's really having that belief, and that strong belief, that to set the foundations. It's having strong foundations to a meeting, to a human interaction, and not getting swayed, but at the same time, learning skills that ensure that you listen carefully, you you look for signals, you look for signs, and you adapt accordingly. It's a skill set. And I know that you and much of your work from, everything that you've done in terms of negotiation skills. So in the, it's really applicable in this sense. Looking out for those cues and signals and keeping on the right track, but adapting to what the other person's needs are, and understanding there's a mutual gain to be had here. And what is it that they are looking for? What is it that I want out of the meeting? And this can be a negotiation, as I say, or it can be an interaction in the corridor with a difficult person, and if you go in prepared. I teach a lot about preparation. So I have a system which is basically the roadmap to a lasting, successful retail partnership. And the framework within that is the strategic consulting and also the skill set development. But within that, therefore, it's about how do you unlock these challenges based on your knowledge, the strategy and the preparation, but also on honing your skills. So that's really, how I am helping people really in these challenging situations, whether it's a negotiation or through my personal, development coaching, whether it's through a less official situation than that.
So talk a bit about your roadmap and your strategic overview, because I think that's important, like getting the right partner. Because I can't help wondering, so I talk a lot about difficult people, and clearly that's the theme of the book. And difficult people is often where we don't make a personal connection. So we're just struggling to understand where's this person coming from. But there could be something more fundamental there, which is they're just not the right partner for us. And I think it touches on some of the things you talked about earlier, which is making a choice of, is this in line with my values? Is this working for me? How important are they? And my advice in the book is to really assess that. Is this person someone that I have to do business with? They are very important to me. Or is it someone that isn't and I could do without? And making that conscious choice and really thinking about that is important. And I guess that's part of some of your strategic framework, is finding the right partnership. If you've got like a wellness brand that you're trying to find a partner to work with you to help elevate, find these new opportunities and new ideas, you absolutely need to find someone else who shares your vision and shares the kind of thinking that you want. If you're partnering with someone who you just like the sound of because they could be quite cool, that's going to lead to difficulties before, like, you can just predict that, surely. And do you ever look at clients that way and say, actually, let's go back to the strategy and look back at why you've chosen these partners and where you need to go?
Yeah, sure. I think, one of the things I ask myself is, does this person or does this person's business, does this business add value? So yes, you can say, I'm in a position now where people come to me and ask me for help, and I can choose whether to work with them or not. And I think a big part of that is, are they adding value to what I'm doing? Am I going to be adding value to what they're doing? And is there a fit? Is there a fit in our values and our ethos and how we go about life, how we do things? And it could sound fluffy to some, but you do get a feel for that. And it's often, I wouldn't make that decision without meeting people at bare minimum on Zoom, online. But in person is even better where we can. And it's about going with that gut feel you talked about earlier. And I think when you're looking for a partner, you can you can maybe make the wrong decision based on pure monetary value, and it's not all about that. It is about whether you have the right DNA fit. And I like to talk about what is my DNA and what is the person that's come to me for help. What's their DNA in terms of brand values or core values, and is there a fit? And that's how we talk about where they want to get to with a retailer. Is there a fit with their brand values and the retailer's values? And we have to see every person that we partner with as a unique person, a unique entity, and every business that we partner with. So whether you're talking about a retailer or a different business partner, they're all unique. There isn't one that fit size that fits all. Everyone is unique, and each business is unique. So it's coming at it from that level, really. And I have, I'm learning to say no to certain people or businesses that I just feel that there isn't a fit with the way I do things, the what I would like to achieve from the partnership. So I do feel it's about values and fit for me.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think that's one of my challenges at times to clients I work with is a one-size-fits-all approach to retail, where they feel like we've got a brand that we're trying to sell to a consumer, and we are, very focused on selling that brand to the consumer, and we want to work with all retailers, and we have our strategy, and it completely overlooks the priorities, the focus, the strategy of the retailer, who are trying to find their own niche. They're working in their own competitive space, and it gets overlooked a lot. From simple things like pricing policies to other things around how they brand and how they approach the category and all sorts of other stuff is, well, this is the way we do stuff. This is the way we operate. And you're not taking seriously the partner that you're working with. And to try to go to all retailers, all channels with the same approach, with the same thinking, I think is you're creating difficulty in itself. You're being difficult because you're trying to impose. Now, there are some brands that can get away with that, because if you're Disney, do you know what? Everybody wants the latest branding that you've got because it gives them an edge and an opportunity. But for most products and most brands, we don't have that luxury. And finding ways to really engage and empathize and understand and connect with the partner that you're building, I think is a really essential foundation.
Yeah, no, true. And, even the example of Disney have to work and they've found ways of working differently with different retailers because of the different needs of different retailers. So, you may be in the discount arena and have different needs and requirements to someone that's in the premium arena. So there's lots of different things happening even across brands, hierarchically. So in terms of collaborations or enabling certain retailers or partnerships to produce product direct under license. So there are different licensing models happening dependent on the specific needs of a particular retailer.
Yeah, amazing. Helen, it's been such a wonderful conversation. How can people get in touch with you? So if people want to look into working with you and learning about licensing or getting more connected to retail customers or even getting some personal coaching from you, how can
Absolutely.
they find you?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is on LinkedIn, and I also have a YouTube channel and my email address. So I think that those links will probably be available, will they, Chris?
They will absolutely be available in the show notes. So yes, not a problem.
Fabulous.
Helen, thank you very much. It's been a really fascinating conversation. Thank you for being so open about the challenges you faced, and I think it does give confidence and fuel to people who are facing similar challenges, that they're not alone and that there are people who understand them, and there is a way through it, and the lessons that we've all learned, we're more than happy to share with the next generation. And I'm sure that you feel exactly the same way.
I do. And I do hope people who are listening can take on some of what we've said. And yeah, it's all about helping each other grow and being able to move on positively. So yeah, thanks so much to you, Chris, for inviting me along. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Commercial Edge podcast. I'll be back soon with another episode. Join me then when we delve into more difficult conversations. See you next time.